It was past midnight when the sound of a soft knock echoed through the grand halls of a large, silent mansion. The billionaire who lived there, a man used to wealth, power, and solitude, had almost never heard such a sound at this hour. He was sitting in his study, surrounded by shelves filled with rare books and glowing screens showing numbers and charts. His life was orderly, precise, and completely predictable. Privacy was his rule, and interruptions were not welcome. He frowned and muttered under his breath. Who could possibly be knocking at this hour? He tried to ignore it, thinking it might be a neighbor or a mistake, but the knock came again, soft yet determined, breaking through the quiet night. A strange feeling stirred in him, one he hadn't felt in years, a flicker of curiosity mixed with annoyance. He stood up and walked to the door, his footsteps echoing across the polished floors. Through the peephole he saw the tiny figure of a girl, her clothes thin and worn, her small face partially hidden by shadows. She looked cold, shivering slightly, but there was a strange courage in her eyes. She looked like someone who had faced a lot in her short life, someone who did not belong in the warmth and comfort of this massive house, but had found herself here for a reason. For a moment, he hesitated. His instinct was to close the door, to return to the safety of his routine. But there was something in her gaze that made him pause. She was not crying, not begging in the loud, desperate way some children did when they wanted something. She simply stood there, waiting, as if she had no other choice in the world. Finally, he opened the door just a crack, keeping most of the door closed. The girl looked up at him and spoke in a small, steady voice. "Sir, I'm sorry for disturbing you. I didn't know where else to go." Her words were simple, but they carried a weight that made him stop. He raised an eyebrow, unsure how to respond. "It's very late. What are you doing out here? Why are you at my door?" His voice was calm, but carried a hint of irritation. The girl swallowed and took a small step closer. "I don't have a home to go to tonight. My family. We are in trouble, and I didn't know where else to ask for help. I thought maybe you could help me." Her voice was trembling slightly, but there was no fear in her eyes, only hope and honesty. The billionaire stared at her, feeling an unfamiliar tension in his chest. He had faced many challenges in business, solved problems that seemed impossible, and yet this small girl, standing barefoot in the cold, brought a kind of unease he had never experienced. There was no threat here, no trickery, only a quiet bravery that made him pause. He opened the door a little wider. "Come inside," he said finally, his tone softer than he intended. The girl's eyes lit up briefly, but she didn't smile. Instead, she stepped carefully into the foyer, her small feet making barely a sound on the polished marble floor. The contrast between them could not have been greater. He wore a tailored suit, expensive shoes, and a watch that cost more than most people earned in a year. She wore a thin jacket, worn pants, and shoes with holes at the toes. And yet, in that moment, she seemed stronger in a way he had forgotten strong in honesty, in courage, in the quiet determination to survive. He led her to a chair near the fireplace and gestured for her to sit. She obeyed without complaint, her small hands folded neatly in her lap. He studied her quietly, trying to understand how someone so young could carry such a presence. She didn't fidget or whine. She simply looked around, taking in the luxurious surroundings with wide, honest eyes, and then looked back at him. "Do you have family?" he asked, though he already had an idea of the answer. The girl nodded slowly. "Yes, but we are having a hard time. My parents. They work, but it's not enough. And tonight? Tonight, there was no one to watch over me, and I didn't know where to go. I'm very sorry to bother you." Her voice was quiet, sincere, and polite. He felt a strange tug in his chest. He was used to people asking for money, favors, or deals, but this was different. This was a child asking for something far more basic: safety, warmth, and understanding. He wanted to turn away, to retreat back into his comfortable, predictable life. But he couldn't. Not when she was standing there with nothing but honesty in her eyes. He gestured toward the fireplace. "It's cold tonight. Sit there, at least. You can warm yourself by the fire." The girl nodded gratefully and shifted slightly closer to the warmth, her small body hunched against the chill. For a few minutes, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the crackling of the fire and the occasional distant hum of the city outside. He watched her, noting the dirt on her shoes, the way her hands were clasped tightly, and the faint tremble in her shoulders. She was scared, yes, but not desperate in a loud way. She was calm in the way only someone who had faced hardship could be. Finally, he asked, "Why me? Why come to my house?" His voice was gentle now, not the sharp tone he had started with. The girl looked up, her eyes meeting his with an honesty that cut through his defenses. "I don't know, sir. I saw the lights on, and I thought maybe someone with a big house could help me. I know it's late. I know it's strange. But I had nowhere else to go." He blinked, surprised by the simplicity and truth of her answer. There was no manipulation, no games, no request for money or gifts. Just a small girl, asking for help because she had no other choice. It made him feel something he hadn't felt in a long time: responsibility, concern, and fear. Fear of what could happen if he did nothing. He leaned back in his chair, trying to collect his thoughts. He had helped people before, of course, through charities and donations, but this was different. This was personal. This was someone in front of him, real and vulnerable. And somehow, he felt that turning her away would not just be cruel, it would haunt him. The girl looked up at him, sensing his hesitation. "Sir, if you cannot help me, I will understand. I didn't know where else to try." Her words were so small, so polite, yet so heavy with meaning that he found himself at a loss. He sighed and rubbed his face. This was not a situation he was used to. He was used to control, to making decisions with logic and calculation. This was different. This required compassion, patience, and a heart he had long kept hidden. "All right," he said finally, his voice steady. "You can stay here tonight. I will make sure you are safe." The girl's eyes widened briefly, not in joy, but in relief. She nodded quietly, understanding the gravity of his decision. He went to fetch a warm blanket and a cup of tea, which she accepted with a polite, quiet thank you. She didn't speak much, but her presence filled the room in a way he hadn't expected. He watched her sit quietly, sipping the tea, and for the first time in years, he felt the weight of silence differently. It was not emptiness. It was a moment of connection. Small but real dot, as he returned to his study, he glanced back at her, noticing the way she had adjusted the blanket around her shoulders and the careful way she placed the cup down. She was not just a child in need. She was a person with dignity, courage, and an understanding of the world that went beyond her years. The billionaire sat back in his chair, trying to return to his work, but his mind kept drifting to the small girl by the fireplace. He realized that tonight would not be like any other night. Something had changed, though he didn't yet understand what. A small knock on the door had broken through his walls of solitude, and he found himself unsettled, thinking about a child he barely knew, and the unexpected responsibility he had taken on outside. The city slept, unaware of the quiet, powerful moment happening in a grand mansion. Inside, a small girl sat by the fire, and a man who had everything was about to discover something he had long forgotten: that life was not just about wealth, power, or comfort. It was about people, about honesty, about courage, and sometimes about listening to the smallest voice at the door at midnight. And so In the stillness of the night, a strange and fragile connection began to form, one that would change both of their lives forever. The next morning, the mansion was quiet in a way that made the billionaire uneasy. He was used to silence, but last night's events lingered in his mind. He found himself waking earlier than usual, not because of his alarms, but because of the small presence in his home. The girl had not made a sound, not a single complaint, yet her being there had filled the space with life he had long ignored. He found her in the kitchen, sitting at the table with a small bowl of porridge. She had eaten slowly, carefully, with a kind of respect for the food he had not expected. She did not ask for fancy breakfast, or more than she needed. She simply ate, quietly, showing a patience that made him pause. "Good morning," he said, trying to keep his voice casual. It felt strange to say it aloud. The girl looked up at him and nodded. "Good morning, sir," she replied politely, her voice calm. There was no fear, no hesitation. She had a presence that demanded respect, though she was only a child. He watched her for a moment, noticing the way she held herself. There was dignity in her posture, a quiet strength that went beyond her age. It made him wonder how much she had endured in her life, how much courage it took to come to a stranger's home at midnight. "Your clothes. You should have something warmer," he said, finally breaking the silence. She shook her head gently. "It's all right. I'm used to it. I didn't want to trouble you, sir." Her words were honest, humble, and carried a weight he could not ignore. He sighed. "No, you are not troubling me. You have a right to warmth. Wait here." He went to his study and returned with a thick sweater and a scarf. She took them with a quiet thank you, slipping them on with care. She did not fuss, she did not complain, yet her gratitude was clear in her eyes. As the day began, he found himself watching her, observing how she moved through the house with quiet curiosity. She did not touch anything unnecessarily. She did not leave things out of place. She seemed to understand the value of respect, even in a home that was foreign to her. He asked her about school, about her daily life, about the small things most children took for granted. She spoke honestly, describing her days helping her family, running small errands, and taking care of younger siblings. Her words were simple, yet they revealed a maturity far beyond her years. "You are very brave," he said at one point. He was not used to saying such things. Praise was something he reserved for success in business, not for courage in life. But she looked at him with calm eyes, as if she understood the difference. "I have to be," she said simply. "There is no other way." Her words stayed with him. They were not complaints, not pleas, but a matter-of-fact statement of survival. She had faced hardship without whining, without losing her sense of self. The morning passed slowly, filled with small conversations and quiet moments. He realized that he was learning from her, not the other way around. She taught him patience, humility, and the importance of human connection. He had spent years surrounded by wealth and people who wanted something from him, but she was different. She asked nothing but understanding and safety. By midday, he decided to take her outside into the garden. The winter sun was weak, but warm enough to chase away some of the chill. He watched as she explored, touching leaves, examining flowers, and listening to the birds. Her eyes lit up in ways he had not seen in a long time. It was a simple joy, but it was profound. "Do you like it here?" he asked, keeping his distance, but curious. "Yes, sir," she replied. "It is very beautiful. I have never seen anything like this before." There was no envy in her voice, no bitterness, just a simple appreciation, a rare gift he realized he had almost forgotten to notice. He nodded slowly, feeling a strange warmth in his chest. "You can stay as long as you need," he said quietly. He was not used to such decisions being emotional. They were calculated, precise, yet this felt right. Throughout the day, they talked more about her life. She spoke of her family with love and concern. Her words were not complaints, but reflections of responsibility. He realized how much she carried on her small shoulders, how much bravery it required to survive each day. He found himself asking questions about her dreams, about what she wanted in life. She hesitated for a moment, and then smiled faintly. I want to be safe. I want my family to have enough to eat. I want to go to school one day and learn things I don't know yet. Her answer was simple, honest, and deeply human. It was a wish any child could have, yet it carried the weight of experience. He felt a lump in his throat. He was used to people asking for riches, for opportunities, for favors. But she asked for nothing but the basics of life: safety, food, and learning. It was a humbling moment, one that made him reflect on his own life. The afternoon passed in a series of quiet activities. She helped set the table for dinner, showing a natural care and attentiveness. She asked polite questions, listened carefully, and never interrupted. He noticed the way she treated the household with respect, how she adapted to an environment so unlike her own. At one point, she hesitated at the doorway of his office. "Sir, may I ask a question?" she said softly. He nodded. "Yes, what is it? Why do you live all alone? Don't you get lonely?" Her voice was gentle but pointed. He paused, unprepared for such a question. He was used to admiration and respect, not curiosity from someone so young. He looked away for a moment. "I suppose. I am used to it," he said finally. "It is easier this way. Fewer complications." She tilted her head, studying him carefully. "But life is more than comfort and ease. Don't you want people who care about you? Don't you want to feel happy?" Her words were simple, but they struck him deeply. He had never thought about it in that way. His life had been full of luxury and power, yet empty of connection. She had a way of speaking that bypassed his defenses, a way of seeing the truth without accusation. "You are very wise for your age," he said finally. He did not know how else to respond. She smiled faintly, not out of pride, but from understanding. "I have to be. Life doesn't wait for us to be ready." The day turned to evening, and the house felt different. There was a quiet energy, a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire or the heaters. It was the presence of someone who reminded him of things he had long ignored: humility, kindness, and the courage to face life honestly. When dinner was served, she ate politely, thanking him quietly for the meal. She asked questions about the food, about the house, and about the small things in life, showing a curiosity that was natural yet rare. He answered carefully, realizing that she was learning from him, yes, but also teaching him in ways he had not expected. Later, as she prepared to go to sleep in the guest room, she paused and looked at him. "Sir, thank you for helping me. I know it is strange to have a stranger in your home, but I will not forget your kindness." He nodded, feeling a strange sense of responsibility. I am glad you are here," he said quietly. He realized that his life had shifted in a single night. The presence of this small girl, her honesty, her courage, had broken through walls he had built for decades. As she slept, he sat alone in his study again, thinking. He thought about the hardships she had faced, the small acts of bravery she had shown, and the simple honesty of her words. It was not just sympathy he felt. It was a connection, fragile but real, and it unsettled him in ways he had never imagined. For the first time in many years, he wondered what it meant to care about someone outside of business or wealth. He wondered what it meant to truly see another person, to recognize their struggles, their courage, and their humanity. He realized that her visit was more than an interruption. It was a lesson, a reminder that life was not measured by possessions or power, but by honesty, empathy, and the courage to face each day with dignity. And so, In the quiet of the evening, a bond began to grow, a silent understanding between a child who had faced too much and a man who had everything but had forgotten what it meant to live fully. It was the beginning of a story neither of them could have imagined, one that would change both their lives forever. The following morning arrived quietly, with soft sunlight spilling into the grand mansion. The billionaire woke to the hum of his thoughts. He had spent the night reflecting on the little girl and the way she had entered his life so unexpectedly. He could not stop thinking about her courage, the quiet way she had asked for help, and the honesty in her eyes. She had touched a part of him he had long ignored, a part that remembered empathy, kindness, and human connection. Downstairs, he found her already awake, seated at the breakfast table. She had prepared herself with quiet patience, and her small hands were folded neatly as she waited. Her eyes lit up when she noticed him entering, but she did not speak until he approached. "Good morning," he said, softer than usual. "Good morning." "Sir?" she replied, her voice calm, respectful, and yet carrying a gentle confidence that seemed to belong to someone far older. He poured himself coffee and studied her for a moment, noticing small details he hadn't before. The worn edges of her shoes, the faint marks of dirt on her hands, and the way her eyes seemed to carry a weight of responsibility unusual for a child. She had been through so much, and yet she had faced it with dignity. "Are you ready to help with some chores today?" he asked, testing her response. She nodded without hesitation. "Yes, sir. I can do anything that is needed." As the morning unfolded, she moved carefully through the house, tidying up and helping wherever she could. Her presence was quiet, but noticeable. She was respectful, careful, and thoughtful. Every small action spoke of discipline, courage, and awareness beyond her age. He found himself observing her closely. She had a way of seeing the world that was simple yet profound. She noticed the smallest details, the way the plants in the garden needed water, the way the fire in the fireplace needed tending, the way the house's silence could be broken without noise. She moved through his world like a gentle breeze, leaving impressions without demanding attention. At one point, he called her into his study. "Sit," he said, motioning to a chair across from his desk. "I want to ask you something." She obeyed, settling quietly and looking at him with attentive eyes. "Why do you think life has been so difficult for you?" he asked carefully, curious more than judgmental. She looked down for a moment, thinking. "I think life is like that for some people. Some have it easy, some have to struggle. I cannot change that. I can only try to be strong and do what I can." Her words were simple, but they carried weight. She did not complain. She did not question unfairness. She merely accepted it and decided to act. It was a perspective he had long forgotten, a perspective that reminded him of things that money and power could not teach. "You are very wise," he said quietly. He had rarely spoken such words to anyone, let alone a child. Her eyes met his, calm and steady, as if she understood that his compliment was unusual but meaningful. She smiled faintly. "I have to be," she said. "There is no other choice." The day continued with small tasks and quiet companionship. He found himself telling her about his work, about the world he lived in, and the responsibilities he carried. She listened carefully, asking questions that were thoughtful and genuine. She did not interrupt or mock. She simply absorbed knowledge, curious and engaged. At lunchtime, he prepared a simple meal for both of them. She ate politely, asking questions about the food and listening to his answers. She spoke about her own meals, the small things she missed, and the rare moments of joy in her life. He realized that these small stories carried lessons in resilience, humility, and gratitude that he had overlooked in his own pursuit of success. In the afternoon, he asked her to accompany him to the garden. The sun was brighter now, casting a soft glow on the flowers and trees. She explored with cautious delight, touching leaves, watching birds, and observing the world around her with a careful curiosity. "Do you enjoy nature?" he asked. "Yes, sir," she replied. "It feels peaceful. It is different from the city. I like that it does not rush." He nodded, feeling a strange sense of calm. He realized that her presence had changed the rhythm of his home. The mansion was no longer a cold, silent place. It had become a space of learning, observation, and quiet connection. Later, as they returned inside, she hesitated at the doorway of his study again. "Sir, may I ask another question?" "Of course," he said. "Why do you not have anyone else here? Friends, family, someone to share your life with?" Her question was simple, yet piercing. He paused, caught off guard by her honesty. I have chosen to live this way," he replied slowly. "It is easier, simpler, and predictable. But life is not meant to be only simple and predictable," she said softly. "It is about connection, about caring, about learning from others, even if it is hard." Her words carried a wisdom that startled him. She was right. He had been living in a self-made prison, valuing control over connection, and now a small child had shown him what he had been missing. He remained silent, thinking. The house felt quiet, yet alive in a way it had not before. He realized that this little girl, who had arrived at his door unexpectedly, had started to teach him lessons that no book, no wealth, and no experience in business had ever taught Dot as evening approached. He asked her to help him with a small task in the library. She eagerly complied, arranging books, tidying shelves, and asking questions about the rare volumes. Her curiosity was infectious, and he found himself answering patiently, explaining things he had long kept to himself. Afterward, she sat quietly by the window, watching the sunset. He joined her, silent for a few moments, letting the colors of the sky fill the room. "You are very brave to come here alone," he said finally. "Most adults would not have the courage to ask for help the way you did." She looked at him, calm and composed. "I had no other choice, and I had to try." He nodded, realizing that her courage was not loud or demanding. It was quiet, steady, and unwavering. She had faced the unknown and chosen action over fear. As night fell, he prepared a simple dinner, and they ate together in companionable silence. She thanked him politely for the meal, and he realized that her manners, humility, and strength were remarkable. She had endured hardships that most adults could not imagine, yet she carried herself with grace and dignity. Before going to bed, she turned to him. "Sir, I am grateful. I will not forget your kindness." He nodded, feeling a warmth he had not felt in years. "I am glad you are here," he said quietly. He knew that this was more than just an act of charity. He had been touched, changed, and reminded of things he had long forgotten: empathy, patience, and the importance of human connection. That night, he sat in his study, thinking about the little girl who had arrived at his door. Her courage, honesty, and wisdom had shaken him in ways he had never expected. He realized that her presence was more than a simple request for help. It was a lesson, a reminder that life was not about wealth or control, but about connection, understanding, and the quiet bravery to face the unknown. And so, as the house settled into the night, he felt a shift within himself. The walls he had built around his heart were beginning to soften, not because of fear or manipulation, but because of the quiet strength of a small girl who had dared to knock on his door and speak the truth. It was the beginning of a journey neither of them could yet see, one that would change the way he viewed life, compassion, and what it truly meant to care for someone else. A few days passed, and the billionaire began noticing how the little girl had quietly changed the rhythm of his home. She was no longer just a visitor. Her presence had brought life, humility, and perspective to a world he had built around money, rules, and solitude. He found himself smiling more often, listening more carefully, and even anticipating her thoughts. He realized that he was learning as much from her as she was from him. Got one afternoon, as the girl helped him arrange his study, her expression changed. She looked worried, a shadow crossing her small face. The billionaire noticed immediately. "What is wrong?" he asked gently. She hesitated, then said softly, "My family. Something happened today. I don't know how to explain it, but they are in trouble." His heart tightened. Despite his wealth and experience, he felt a pang of helplessness. He had been insulated from the struggles of ordinary life, yet now they were confronting him through this small, brave child. "Tell me what happened," he said firmly, wanting to understand every detail. She described the difficulties her family faced, unexpected debts, illness, and uncertainty that left them vulnerable. She spoke plainly, without dramatics, yet her fear was palpable. She did not ask him for money directly, but it was clear that her family needed help, and she had come to him out of desperation. The billionaire sat in silence, processing the situation. In his world, problems were often solved with contracts, numbers, and strategies. But this was different. This was real, urgent, and deeply human. The courage and honesty of the little girl had brought the challenge into his life in a way he could not ignore. "We will help them," he said finally. His voice was calm, but his mind raced with the implications. He had always been cautious about getting involved in personal matters, but this was not a choice. He could not turn away. The girl's eyes widened, a flicker of hope appearing. "Really, sir?" she asked quietly. He nodded. "Yes, but we must do it carefully. Tell me everything, every detail, you know. We will figure this out together." As she spoke, he listened attentively, asking questions and taking notes. He realized that her small hands had carried a burden far heavier than he had ever imagined. She had been responsible for her family, brave enough to seek help, and wise enough to approach him, a stranger at midnight. Her actions reflected a strength and resilience that inspired him. They spent the afternoon planning. He made phone calls, arranged meetings, and coordinated efforts to ensure the family would be safe. All the while, the girl remained close, observing his actions with quiet curiosity. She asked questions, offered suggestions, and showed a maturity that amazed him. Despite being a child, she understood the gravity of the situation and the importance of careful planning. By evening, some of the immediate challenges were resolved. The family had assistance lined up, food and shelter secured, and urgent debts managed. The girl breathed a small sigh of relief, but she remained thoughtful. "Thank you, sir. I don't know how to repay you," she said. He smiled gently. "You don't need to repay me. You were brave enough to ask for help, and you taught me a lesson in courage and honesty. That is enough." For the first time, the billionaire noticed something deeper in himself. He realized that his wealth had always been a shield, keeping the world at a distance. Yet here, he had discovered that money was not the measure of life's value. Compassion, action, and courage were. The little girl had shown him that true power lay not in what he owned, but in what he did for others. That night, they sat together by the fireplace. The girl had a quiet smile on her face, but her eyes reflected the relief and exhaustion of responsibility. He handed her a warm cup of tea, and she accepted it with a soft, sincere, "Thank you." "You were very brave," he said again. "I have never seen anyone face challenges the way you have." She shrugged lightly, modest and unassuming. "I had to. There was no other way." He studied her, thinking about the life she had lived, the courage she had shown, and the lessons she had imparted without words. He realized that he had been living for years with walls around his heart, walls built from fear, control, and solitude. She had quietly chipped away at them with honesty, bravery, and humility. "Tomorrow," he said, "I want to do more. I want to make sure your family is secure for the long term, not just today. I cannot promise everything, but I can promise that we will do what is right." The girl looked at him, her eyes shining. "Thank you, sir. You have done more than I could have imagined." They sat in silence for a while, watching the fire. The mansion, once cold and empty, now felt alive with purpose. The billionaire realized that life was not about isolation, wealth, or power alone. It was about connectio. Courage and the quiet, brave acts that change lives. The girl had reminded him of what truly mattered. In the days that followed, they worked together to support her family. She shared her knowledge of their needs, her fears, and her hopes. He listened, learned, and acted. Together, they faced challenges, solved problems, and gradually built stability for her loved ones. He discovered that, by helping her, he was helping himself. He was reconnecting with the humanity he had long ignored. One evening, after a long day of planning and coordination, the girl looked at him and asked quietly, "Sir, do you think people can really change?" He paused, considering her words carefully. "Yes," he said finally. "I think people can change if they are willing to see the truth, to learn, and to act with courage. You have shown me that change is possible." She nodded, a small, satisfied smile forming. "I hope so," she said softly. "I want to believe that life can be better, not just for me, but for everyone." He felt a deep respect for her perspective. In her young life, she had already learned lessons that many adults never grasp. She had learned resilience, compassion, and the importance of honesty. She had also reminded him of these same lessons, and he realized how much he still had to learn. As the night deepened, he reflected on the events of the past days. The girl had come to his door alone, vulnerable and courageous, and in doing so, she had transformed his life. He had acted to help her family, yes, but he had also learned lessons in bravery, humility, and the quiet power of human connection. He understood now that his life had been incomplete. He had wealth, influence, and comfort, but he had lacked purpose beyond himself. This little girl had shown him that true purpose came from caring for others, from acting with honesty and courage, and from allowing oneself to connect deeply with those in need. Before going to bed, he checked on her. She was asleep, her small face peaceful, her breathing even. He felt a protective warmth for her, a desire to see her safe and thriving. For the first time in years, he slept not in solitude, but with the knowledge that life could be different, richer, and more meaningful than he had ever imagined. The mansion, once a place of isolation, was now filled with lessons learned, courage witnessed, and hope renewed. The billionaire knew that the journey was far from over, but he also knew that the little girl who had knocked on his door at midnight had started a transformation that would touch them both forever. And in that quiet, warm night, he realized that helping someone in need was not just an act of kindness, it was a discovery of one's own humanity, the kind that could not be measured in wealth, possessions, or power. It was the kind that shaped lives, healed hearts, and built connections stronger than any walls could ever contain. The days that followed were different from anything the billionaire had ever known. The little girl became a permanent presence in the mansion, not because he had asked her to stay, but because she belonged there in a way that felt natural. She moved with quiet confidence, helping where needed, observing and learning. Yet she also brought a sense of life and energy the house had lacked for decades. He found himself looking forward to her questions, her observations, and her calm wisdom. She had a way of seeing the world that reminded him of forgotten truths, and he listened to her not as a child, but as a teacher of courage and honesty. Each day, he realized how much he had taken for granted, the simplicity of care, the quiet joy in small victories, and the value of human connection. One morning, he found her sitting in the garden, her eyes focused on the horizon. The sun was rising, casting a golden glow over the mansion. He joined her silently, letting the warmth of the sun fill the quiet space. "You seem happy," he said gently, observing her calm demeanor. "I am, sir," she replied. "I feel safe. I feel like I belong somewhere." Her words were soft, yet they carried depth. She was a child, but her understanding of life was profound. He nodded, feeling a warmth in his chest that he had not experienced in years. He had been rich in wealth, but poor in heart, until she had arrived. Her courage and honesty had transformed not only her life, but his as well. They spent the morning tending to small projects around the house. She helped organize the library, clean the rooms, and prepare meals. Every action was deliberate, thoughtful, and careful. Her presence reminded him that life's true value was in caring for others, not in possessions or control. As they worked, she asked him questions about the world beyond the mansion. She wanted to know about his travels, the people he had met, and the lessons he had learned. He answered patiently, realizing that sharing his experiences with her was not just teaching, it was a way to reflect on his own life and understand it more deeply. By afternoon, they had completed many tasks. The mansion felt alive, warm, and full of purpose. He realized that he was no longer just a wealthy man. He was someone who had been reminded of what truly mattered: compassion, courage, and connection. Later, she spoke quietly, almost to herself. "Sir, do you think people can really be kind without expecting anything in return?" He considered her question, his mind reflecting on the past days. "Yes," he said finally. "I think true kindness is rare, but it exists. It comes from understanding, from empathy, and from the desire to make a difference, even if no one notices." She smiled faintly, a small but genuine expression of understanding. "I hope more people can learn that. It would make the world better." He nodded silently, realizing that she was teaching him lessons he had long forgotten. She was a child, yet she carried the wisdom of someone who had seen hardship and learned resilience. Her perspective was simple, honest, and deeply human. That evening, he asked her to sit with him in the study. "I want to show you something," he said. He opened a drawer and took out a small notebook. It was filled with his thoughts, ideas, and reflections over the years. He handed it to her. "This is mine," he said. "I have never shared it with anyone. I want you to read it and understand me, as I have tried to understand you." She accepted it carefully, her eyes wide with curiosity and respect. She opened the pages slowly, reading his words with quiet attentiveness. She did not judge. She simply absorbed thoughts, offering insights when appropriate, and asking questions that reflected her deep understanding. As the night fell, they sat together in silence, reading, sharing, and reflecting. The mansion, once a place of solitude and silence, now felt alive with thought, purpose, and understanding. He realized that the little girl had not only brought him joy, but also a renewed sense of responsibility, empathy, and humanity. The next morning, he received news that the support they had arranged for her family was taking effect. They were safe, stable, and beginning to regain hope. She shared the news with quiet satisfaction, her eyes reflecting relief and gratitude. "Sir, we did it," she said softly. "Yes," he replied. "Together, we did it. You were brave, and you guided me." Her expression softened, and she reached out, placing her small hand gently on his. "Thank you for believing in me." He felt a lump in his throat. He had never known gratitude like this, pure and unfiltered. He had given help, yes, but he had received far more in return: lessons in courage, humility, and the power of human connection. Days turned into weeks, and their bond grew stronger. She remained a steady presence, teaching him patience, empathy, and the beauty of simple joys. They shared meals, stories, and quiet moments. She asked questions that challenged his thinking, offered perspectives that were fresh and honest, and reminded him that life's true value was not in wealth, but in kindness and courage. One evening, as they watched the sunset from the garden, she spoke softly, almost hesitantly. "Sir, will you continue to help others like you helped my family?" He looked at her, the question striking a chord deep within him. "Yes," he said finally, "I will. You have reminded me that life is not about keeping wealth or power for myself. It is about making a difference where it matters." Her smile was faint but radiant. "Then the world will be better, sir, because you will care." He realized then that her courage, honesty, and wisdom had not only changed his life, but had set in motion a ripple of good that could extend far beyond their small world. He felt a sense of purpose he had never known, a commitment to compassion and action that would define his days. In the quiet of the night, he walked through the mansion, observing the changes that had taken place. The halls felt warmer, the rooms brighter, and the air lighter. He realized that the little girl who had knocked on his door at midnight had transformed not only his home, but his heart. He found her asleep, peaceful and serene. He watched her for a long moment, feeling a protective warmth and deep respect. She had faced hardships with courage and humility, and she had shown him that life's true strength came from honesty, kindness, and the willingness to act for others. As he sat by the window, gazing at the stars, he reflected on the journey that had begun with a knock on the door. He understood now that wealth and power were empty without purpose, without connection, and without courage. The little girl had reminded him of the simplest yet most profound truths: to care, to act, and to be brave in the face of the unknown. And so, their story came full circle. The mansion, once silent and cold, was now filled with life, warmth, and meaning. The billionaire had discovered the true value of compassion and human connection, and the little girl had found safety, guidance, and a home where she belonged. Together, they had changed each other's lives, proving that even the smallest act of courage can create ripples that transform the world. As dawn approached, he whispered softly, more to himself than anyone else, "Thank you for reminding me what it means to live." The little girl slept on, unaware of the profound impact she had made, yet the truth was undeniable. A single knock, a brave heart, and honest words had forever altered the path of two lives, leaving a legacy of courage, compassion, and hope that would never fade.